Foundation webinar. I'm your host, Jonathan Ross, and author of our Alzheimer's and Brain Fitness Specialist course. Today, we have Joanne Groves with us, and she's going to be presenting how play can change the experience of fibromyalgia. Quick note for everyone, you'll be muted during the broadcast. If you have any questions, just type them into the questions panel. As soon as they occur to you, we'll deliver them to Joanne after she's concluded her presentation. And also, you will have a chance to watch the replay of the webinar today anytime you want. In a few hours after this concludes, the follow-up email will go out and you'll be able to watch that replay as well. And so let's meet Joanne virtually, and then you can spend some time with her in person. Joanne is the course director at Faster Health and Fitness. She has 30 years of grassroots experience, excels in boosting net income for facilities and businesses. She brings unparalleled expertise in fitness education, inclusivity, and evidence-based practices. And she is currently on the SIMSPA committee and previously served as an IDEA committee advisor. SIMSPA is like the continuing education requirement board in the UK. She's extremely passionate about empowering trainers to question the balance of quality research, giving trainers and business owners the process that enables them to deliver the best evidence-based experience. Okay, Joanne, I'm going to turn off my mic and my camera and turn it over to you and let you go do your thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. Right, today I'm really excited because we're going to be looking at how gameplay, which is, well, we're going to explore what gameplay really is, but let's just say it's getting to the heart of motor skill development, and it's creating a really meaningful way of moving. And then we're going to combine that with changing our experience of fibromyalgia. So we're going to have to look at what an experience is. And I propose that we actually look at how an experience is driven by many, many things. And one of those things we're going to look at is expectation. And hopefully, this is going to impact your clients. It's going to be something that you can take away with some really strong strategies to use. Obviously, I would like to be offering you a silver bullet, a one-size-fits-all kind of solve all problems, but that's not life. And so, although I would love movement to be the answer to everything, I do have a bit of a bias there. And it's just important to know straight from the off, if anybody has any form of unexplained pain, they need to be sent out to get that diagnosed or to rule out any other form of diagnosis. That's really super, super important. And sometimes you will find that movement just isn't right at this point in time for your client. But that doesn't mean there aren't some great opportunities ahead of us. So let's get moving. Fibromyalgia, actually 2 to 4% of the whole population will suffer from fibromyalgia. That might not sound a lot initially, but that's a vast amount of people. That's 320 million people. And what's interesting is 80 to 90% of those people are women. Now, that's not to say that men don't suffer from fibromyalgia at all. Sometimes it may be due to the fact that they might not have gone and got a diagnosis. And that's an interesting one because there's actually no specific diagnosis for fibromyalgia, which is really, really challenging for someone who is experiencing those symptoms. Now, hopefully, maybe at the end of this session, we'll have a bit of time to have a look at some of those things in more detail, but I kind of want to get to the gameplay because that's the priority in this. I'm not a doctor, so I don't diagnose. But let's just say the way somebody finds out whether they might have fibromyalgia is through clearing out any other symptoms. So making sure that it's not lupus or B12 deficiency, checking that it's not COVID-19 long COVID. So that what they'll do is they will rule things out. But what I wanted to stress is there is no blood test. There are no biological markers that can be checked in order to be able to say you have fibromyalgia. It's more of, well, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, so it must be this. So when I first started in the fitness industry, what I did was the courses that were available to us. And my first client that came to me in 2013 with fibromyalgia I started where I thought, okay, I need to help her move in a place that was safe. And what I worked on was making sure that she was balanced, that she didn't have any muscular imbalances. So I tried to work on symmetry. That works for me because I'm a little bit weird and I do like things to be balanced up symmetrically. If you go to my house, there might be a bit of mess, but there's a balanced amount of mess. And so that worked well for me. And then what I also did was to work on correcting posture, because a lot of what I was taught was that if we make sure that someone doesn't have any muscular imbalances and we then correct posture, what we can do is reduce pain. But that would be assuming that posture was actually a causation of pain. That might be something we need to look into. What I then did was another course all around how we could create range of motion by getting our hands on to our clients. And at this point, I must admit, I was beginning to think, this is awesome. I can actually fix people. And my client with fibromyalgia was doing really, really well. And I was using some of these hands-on techniques. If you've got somebody who's looking to improve their range of motion in a squat, what I would do is get down low by their ankle and I would just gradually internally rotate that tib fib. And that seemed marvelous for a short amount of time. Then, if anybody else has been in the industry for as long as I have, you were introduced to the foam roller. I think this was about 2007 for me here in the UK. And this seemed really promising because you could get people on it to actually put pressure onto what was known as trigger points or pressure points. And this is something that's interesting when we look at fibromyalgia, because it's one of the ways in which they might say, I think you've got fibromyalgia, because 11 to 18 of these pressure points are sensitive on your body. Well, if anybody's ever actually used a foam roller, you know it's pretty sensitive whether you've got fibromyalgia or not. It's not a very nice experience. I mean, sometimes people love pain, but we'll go into that further later on. It's contextual whether you like pain or not, and how much pain feels nice to you. But there is a problem here. Now, I don't have an issue with a client that wants to do foam rolling. They can go and do their foam rolling. But what I would probably do is encourage them to do it outside of the session so that I can follow the best balance of scientific research in order to give them movement opportunities, because we all know how wonderful movement is for many, many things: our mental health, our coordination, our cardiovascular health, our muscle strength, all of those marvelous, marvelous things. So I want to get people moving. However, if you are experiencing symptoms from fibromyalgia, I recommend that you bin your foam roller. And we'll look into that a little bit later on. So what exactly is fibromyalgia? Well, if you took its name and looked at the Greek meaning, fibro meaning in the fibers, myo meaning in the muscle, and myalgia meaning pain, you might think that it is something that is around pain in the muscles, or muscle damage, even worse. But this is a relatively new term, and it came in about, I think, the late 1990s, so it's fairly new. But there's a really interesting study from John Quintner, who really does go at every other pain scientist that says that it's in the muscle. And he disputes that strongly and says it's a disorder of pain regulation. And he doesn't even just put it in the bag of central nervous system high sensitization. So he said it's that whole body experience, that pain regulation. And he also does argue how redundant the association between trigger point therapy and fibromyalgia is, because it becomes a circular argument. You've got fibromyalgia because you've got pain. You've got pain because you've got fibromyalgia. You've got fibromyalgia because you've got pain. And so it goes on. So my hope is that we can come away with something by the end of this session that gets involved here, and we start to think, yes, there are some things that we can do that are helpful. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to what pain is, because this is a really tough one. And after I used to do all of the exercises to correct movement, and when I strongly believed that posture was a causation of pain, and I then had to challenge that bias and do a bit of grieving at the same time to understand that it's a correlation and not a causation. And actually, our posture is our body's best way of holding itself according to the skill that it's in, the environment that it's in, the context, the task, all of those things. So you might say that posture is your body's best way of holding itself according to the mood that it's in. So pain, what's pain? Some people say pain's in the brain, but I think that is an oversimplification and is not helpful, particularly to someone who's experiencing pain or experiencing something like fibromyalgia, pain, brain fog, fatigue. Pain can be perceived as a warning of potential damage that can also be present when no actual harm is being done to the body. It does not have to be in a tissue. It does not mean there is damage. You can have pain with damage. You can have pain with no damage. You can have no damage and have pain. And this is really, really important. The other thing I wanted to have a look at is pain. According to the British Pain Society, is an emotion that is experienced in the brain. Well, as I've said, I think that should be disputed, and it's more of a whole body experience because it just oversimplifies it. Yes, the brain and the central nervous system might go, oh, I'm going to value it based on a previous experience or an expectation that I have or a memory of something that has happened to me. But all of those things are involved. But what I do want to clarify, it is not like touch, taste, sight, smell, or hearing. And pain is categorized into two parts. So we've got acute pain, and when we say that, we're not talking, like a nice meow, cute little pussycat type pain. We're talking you've just stepped your foot and a nail has gone straight through my red trainers and straight through my foot. Ouch type of pain. And then we have chronic pain, and that is pain that lasts for longer than 12 weeks. And as fitness professionals, we deal with a lot of people that are experiencing chronic pain, basically because if someone does step on a great big nail through their foot, the best person to go and see is not a personal trainer. I know that seems odd, but they really do need to go to the hospital first of all. So all of these things are really important. Now, as we go further on, we do have things in our life that can help us navigate pain. And this is our endogenous opioids that are in our brain. And the great thing about these endogenous opioids is it's like having a drugs cabinet with drugs that are available 24/7 that aren't addictive. That's pretty cool. But how do we tap into actually getting these opioids? Well, some strange people will jump into an ice bath. I would call those weird, but that's because that's my perception of getting into a freezing cold water. I'm not into that. But that is one way of actually releasing those opioids. Now, we do all have a bias, I'm sure, on this call, as I mentioned, and there is another classic, brilliant way of getting hold of those opioids, and that is through movement. So that's pretty cool. Movement and laughter. And who doesn't love going to see a good comedy show, going to the theatre and really being immersed in an experience like that? Well, I haven't always been a geeky fitness trainer. I used to be an actress, and I would say that's probably where I learned, first of all, about a feedback loop in an experience, because we would get up on stage and we would deliver the same story to a group of people. But in that delivery, in that whole night at the theatre, people would have moments where something got them. And when something got them, they kind of had this chemical reaction, and that would be an emotion. Their muscles would change and get a hormonal release. And then in their brain, they would have to decide whether this is an opportunity, stay to the rest of the end of the play, or whether they needed to get out, freeze, fight, or flight. That probably only happened if somebody made a foul smell and thought, I'm not staying around for this one. But what it taught me was that throughout the play, people would have responses to different emotions, and these responses would be feelings. And then the group of feelings would create the experience. And so they would actually judge the play on the whole experience. And there could be moments in there where they felt elated, happy. There could have been moments where they felt terrified or sad. Or as I was dragging this poor girl around the stage, it was just such a fantastic part, I actually saw people coming in and go, and they were experiencing the pain for this poor girl as I was dragging her, what looked like by her hair, around the stage. But the interesting part was she wasn't in pain, because actually what I'd done is I'd got my hand, clasped it on her head. She grabbed my hand and my arm, and it was her that was in control, dragging me around the stage. But that's just another great example of we can experience pain without any damage to us. So what we talked about there was really what an experience is. So just to reiterate, an experience is all those little feelings at the bottom of the screen there, all together make up that experience. And they come from some feelings. And where do the feelings come from? They come from an emotion that has gone through the central nervous system that at pace, like the Matrix, has to go, what does this mean to me? Have I got any memories of this? What do I anticipate is going to happen next? What about this situation is good? What about this situation is bad? All of these things are happening at pace. But before that, you had the what moment, the moment that some form of information became so important to you that it crossed a threshold and you were triggered. And you might even think triggered means bad. But when I say the word triggered in context, I'm just saying it was important enough for you to have this emotional response. And then to that emotional response, you got about 6 seconds where central nervous system will put it all into play. And the reason this is so important before we get to gameplay is because we need to help manage the experience our clients get with us. Because if we're not managing that experience, then who is? And we want to make sure that we're creating an environment that feels safe. We are creating tasks that they're capable of, that we're creating a game that will help them to build their coordination skills and feel that competence, that self-efficacy. It's not about fixing. The important part is we learn from different feelings. And what also happens is we need less and less information to jump to a conclusion. And we're always learning from different things. Now, back in, I think it was the early 21st century, there was a group of, I'm going to call them nasty neuroscientists, because what they did was they got a group of monkeys and they decided to test the monkeys' brains to see what was happening, what activities was going on. And what they did was they gave the monkeys apple juice. So that's quite nice. They gave them apple juice, and the monkeys loved the apple juice. But before they gave them the apple juice, they flashed a light. And then what they noticed was as the monkeys drank the apple juice, the sweet apple juice, they were like, oh, this is nice. Something happened in the brain. Dopamine was firing. But when they continued to do this experiment, flashing light, sweet apple juice. Something changed in the brain. The brain learnt to anticipate the sweet apple juice. So as soon as it saw the flashing light, dopamine was firing. They continued with this experiment, but then what they did was they switched the apple juice for water. And this is what I find interesting. You can guess what happened here. They were given the what they thought was juice, anticipating this nice sweet flavour, and it's water. And it wasn't long before the monkey's brains had learnt and dopamine wasn't firing any more than it had been from base level. So that is a prediction error. And this is one of the really strong theories around fibromyalgia, and that is a heightened central nervous system, that rather than having lots of information from all the senses that are around us and then having our trigger and responding to the emotion, it doesn't need as much information. It goes straight to being an emotion, and the brain goes, panic, and protects us and sees something as a threat, as a danger. And this reinforcement of something being negative or something being dysfunctional or being tight or weak or needing to be corrected can all be words that can exasperate this reinforcement. So it's like you've been broken into. And if anybody has ever been broken into, I'm sorry about that. You know that moment where it's devastating and you feel like I've got to do everything I possibly can to protect my house. So you get the best alarm system to come in, but it's almost like it's an AI learning alarm system. And it's so strong now. All you want it to do is to warn you if there is a human-sized predator around your property. But no, this thing's now kicking off if there is a dog or a fox or a bird, worse still, a caterpillar, because it needs less and less information. So in this theory, what we need to do is we need to try and work out a way in which we can show the central nervous system that it's safe, that it's okay, that its anticipation of danger can now be calmed down. And to do that, we need to try and find ways of reinforcing positive experiences. So different prediction errors, but now thinking about how can we make this positive. But the only problem with this, it kind of oversimplifies things a lot. It's a really good theory, and it is something that is really useful when we're trying to help someone with fibromyalgia. But like movement, if we start to say movement is all about biomechanics, we're missing a bigger picture. If we're saying that movement is all about the brain, we're missing a bigger picture. If we're saying it's about the biomechanics and just the brain, we're missing the environment, the social economic society around someone. And if we're saying that and we're missing the task, we're missing things that are meaningful for people. So for that reason, I think it's really useful to be aware of the central nervous system and that heightened sensitivity. But it's always worth thinking physical, psychological. They can't be pulled apart. They can't be ripped apart. And if they are, there's a word that describes that. We might get to that later when I can see Jonathan's face. Okay, so movement. We're really talking now about, so we're getting close to games. Movement, motor skill application. It's about how we find and connect a reason to move. That could be you've had a trigger and you're hungry and you want to get to the sandwich. Or it could be that you've had a trigger and you want to run away from the wild bear. Opportunity or threat. But hopefully we've had lots of learning experiences as a small child, learning to crawl, learning to walk. And once we've mastered those skills and we've been able to get those intra and intramuscular contractions to happen in the right sequence, in the right order, with the right power output. I go like that because if I didn't have the right power output, I would smash my head too hard. we need to put all of those skills together, that coordination. And then when we get good at it, we need new reasons to move and need to put it under pressure. So here we've got a family chasing each other around the tree. A really simple little game. But we know what success looks like. That's the moment that mum or dad taps the child on the shoulder. But in order for all of this to happen, there's a lot going on. Motor skill. There's a lot going on. We've got the ability to be able to locomote sideways. We've got the ability to be able to stop and turn. But if all of that isn't comfortable, it's not going to be a great experience. So what we're starting to look at is motor skill. And this is really important because really, if we want our client to experience movement, we either use an exercise to get somebody from being skillful to being more skillful, and then we put them in a situation where we put pressure on that movement in performance. Now, when we talked about the whole experience and going into the brain, we said there that the emotion, how it's valued and how it's looked at by the central nervous system and reinforced, that's the same as pain. That's also the same as fatigue, and it's also the same as performance. So this is really important. What we want to think about is we get somebody skillful through movement, and we do that either as a kid, come and walk to me, and they learn everything beautifully. But then what seems to happen in the fitness industry is we start to overcoach it. Knees in line with toes, shoulders pulled back and down. Make sure you're activating your glutes. Your transverse abdominals are pulled into at 30%, as if you could separate the biomechanics from the brain, from the environment, from the task at hand. What we really do is we give someone an opportunity to master a skill, put it into new different ways. And that would be at the white end of my little triangles there. And if they've got a skill and they can put that skill, let's say, for example, you can walk forward. Can you walk backwards? Can you run? Can you run forwards? Can you run backwards? Can you run side to side? Can you run round in circles? Well, now what we can do is we can start to put that into performance and put it under pressure. And pressure for running might be how fast you can go with load assistance for acceleration that releases. That could be something like that. This is going to be really important when we get to game and we start to think about our client who's experiencing pain. Because if performance is like pain and it's within that reinforcement where we go, is this an opportunity? Is this threat? We want to make sure that we meet our clients where they are. And so to meet our client where they are, they need to be able to perform that movement well. It needs to be a movement that they are comfortable with, that they feel safe with. So if they've walked in, that might be the very best place for you to start. Then what we need to do is we need to find a compelling reason to move. This compelling reason, it might be I want to be able to play with my children. It might be I want to be able to go to the cinema without feeling uncomfortable. It might be I want to do the gardening, but it needs to emotionally connect to the person. And this is really, really key when we're trying to change experiences. So let's bring something into games. When we start a game, it does have to have some rules, but that's the same as movement, because really all a game is an opportunity to help somebody find a movement skill, that coordination. And then it's about, can we put that skill in more opportunities? And then can we start to go into performance and add a little bit more pressure? So we need to know in a game what success looks like. And this is really important when I talked about meeting someone where they are, because if someone comes in and they've experienced pain, you want to know, is there any moment in their life that they're not in pain? That could be the moment the doorbell rings and it's a grandchild or a son or a daughter, something like that. Because if they have that moment, we can tap into that and bring it into the game, and we can start where they can feel successful. And success to me would be, if we're going to be working on locomotion, then they need to be able to move from one limb to the other, but we could maybe start with a walk. That would be successful. So keeping that sequence. If they want to have the skills to be able to sit on a toilet, then we need to know that success looks like folding from the hip, from the knees, from the foot and ankle. Then we need a target. And a target could be as easy as a cone, or it could be as easy as sitting on a bench, something to get to. And with those targets, you're going to be thinking about, could you reach with a hand? Could you reach with that hand high? Could you reach with that hand shoulder height, hip height, knee height, foot height? Those sorts of things. Adaptation. How do we change it? And this is something that the hard part around training is we need to be responsive to the person in front of us. This isn't a cookie cutter. This isn't generic choreography. This is about adapting to the person in front of you. A client yesterday was boxing with me and I thought, oh, this is the last round. And then I noticed that her little lip was just curling up. And I'm like, oh, we need to do another round. So we adapted in that moment to fulfill that expectation. Then we have to make sure we give our client the opportunity to respond. And what I love about this is not about us correcting or inflicting how we think someone should move. This is about allowing them the opportunity to respond and self-organize their body in order to be successful. And then the last one is throw off. So this is when they've started to be able to master or play the game really well. You've got it in different ways. Now you might want to throw it off by adding a little challenge. It could be as simple as singing a song or remembering to follow each movement by going to a different coloured cone. So you might be playing with cognition. It could be that you're asking someone to go faster or do more repetitions or add intensity. But with all of these things, particularly with fibromyalgia, you need to know your client really, really well, what they like, what they don't like, what they're afraid of, what they look forward to, how they like to feel in the session is going to be how you organize the energy systems you work with. How they want to feel 3 days later, you need to make sure that they're not waking up thinking they've got a flare-up of fibromyalgia, but actually they've got DOMS because you did new movements with them that their body wasn't used to, or that you eccentrically loaded them in a way that they've not experienced. And eccentric loading and new movements are going to be a recipe for most of us personal trainers going, yay, can't walk down the stairs. But that very feeling might go to somebody's brain in fibromyalgia and they might think, this is a danger, and this could then be part of what starts a flare-up, could be part of it. So finding those compelling reasons to move. Why do they want success? Do they want to be able to play with grandchildren? Do they want to be able to do the gardening? Those types of things. And this is where you might use your skills within biomechanics to set the right exercise. It might be that they want to be able to spend long enough time playing pickleball with loved ones. And so we might want to be working at setting up games that will help build confidence around their energy systems, their endurance. It might be that they want to go out dancing and have a little bit more freedom in their life. Now, this little photograph here is a client of mine who came to me with fibromyalgia, and she had been suffering for many, many years. And what I found is that she loved dancing. And so through lockdown, we started to play her game with her husband where they would just follow each other. So if you can see my hands, we would just get her to move those hands. And I gave her the option of being the leader. And what I noticed, which was really super cute, when she was doing it, all of a sudden her game was, I want to make Rob move and I want to make him move as wild as possible. So she went from this to suddenly reaching down, going round corners, but she was in control. It also started to make both of them laugh together. So they had another opportunity at hitting those opioids as they got the giggles too. Rob was far nicer than she was. Now, another thing that might help you when you're putting these games together, because I would love to give you, oh, these are the 7 games you can go off with, or the 5 best games for fibromyalgia. That is definitely an Instagram post right there. But we know that that's absolute rubbish if we're doing that, because it completely neglects the human, the unique person in front of us. But these little tips will just help you. You can think about types of games. So we talked about having targets, but in this game, it might be that you've got your client in the middle and they then have to get out to different cones. But if you think about any game you played as a child, tag, or Rin Tin Tin, or British Bulldogs. I don't even know if that is a thing in America, but that's where we used to all cross crazily. All of these games have these types of rules, and the target might be, well, you're here and you have to run to there, or walk to there, or skip to there, whichever is right for your client. Obstacles, so that could be getting over something, getting under something, getting around something. In the previous one, they were each other's obstacles. Quantitative, so having something that is time driven within that. It could be as simple as having a bucket full of apples and picking out the apples. That would be quantitative, touching a certain amount of cones, or going to a certain amount of different positions in a given time. Reaction, so playing with each other. It might be as simple as, one of the ones I use is, if my client likes tennis, I might set it up that they walk forwards and hit a ball. They might go to 2 and come out to the side and do a forehand. They might go out to the other side and do a backhand shot. And then when I shout 5, they have to run up to the camera or to me and go, you cannot be serious, because we're in Wimbledon and we like to have a bit of fun with the tennis. So something that's reactive. It could be every time you get, I shout out blue, you have to make yourself as small or as big as possible. So you can get creative with the shapes that you want to get. So here we've got a little example of some targets. We've got somebody reaching down. This is Damaris reaching down for a cone. And this is where you can also start to think about using your knowledge of biomechanics. If you want somebody to load into a glute, I might see that she's chosen there her right hand, but now I could put another restraint on that game and say, well, this time I want you to use your left hand to touch the blue cone. That would get her to get more internal rotation on that right hip, providing her knee doesn't swing out, obviously. The next one in the middle, I'm just showing how you could use targets on the floor, and I'm using my leg to reach to the target, but that could equally be my hip, my ear, my belly button, my knee. Belly button's always just a bit more fun. So we can get into some of that giggles. And at the end here, we've got Sarah, and she's just thrown a weighted bag. This could start off with something like I forgot what they're called now, those little tiny bags. That'll come to me later. But she's got different targets. She's got the blue cone, a yellow cone, and the green cone. And the game here was if the bag was near side of the blue, I got to get her to walk to a far off point and back again as fast as she could. If she managed to get the bag further than that last cone, she was able to make me do something ridiculous, which you can see on TikTok. She made me do a silly dance, but that was nice and engaging. And what I'm going to do now is I've just got this little video here that I'm going to bring onto the screen and see if we can share this. So this is Anna, and she's just demonstrating targets, by the way, because we know that this is an incredibly amazing squat, and I'm looking at that going, wow, that is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. But she got down to the very bottom of her squat, and then she reached her hands up into different directions. And so this is an example of targets, but it's also an example of how you can use the body in a way that is specific to what you want. So that would have been ideal if somebody wanted to improve the end range of their squat. So we'd get them down to that end range of squat and then give them the movement to experience. The next one here is obstacles. So getting underneath something, getting over something, the limbo, all of that sort of stuff can be used. Navigating around cones. I've got Hina there going over a ladder. If you look closely, you can see she's wearing boxing gloves, and around her head, she's got a little light ball that we then use so that she has to hit that ball. So that's an obstacle in itself, because if she moves too fast, it's going to fly away. In the middle, we're using a bag, and that's changing the ground reaction underneath her foot. And after doing this, she said, oh, my feet felt fabulous. My legs just felt really good. Just changing that ground reaction can be something that gives somebody a really nice experience. But all of these things mean that my client has to self-discover and learn themselves. Got there, Hina, I don't know if you can see, but she's got these little hoops, and she's just putting them over the different cones. So she's got a number of those hoops, a number of cones to do. In the middle, I'm just showing that you could do this seated. So if you have someone who finds it difficult to stand, you could start where they are and get them to do movements from a seated chair. You could also do a quantitative amount of throws, and if you wanted to make sure that they got more of that shoulder flexion, they throw over the head. But if you're looking to get more of those muscles around the spine, then you might want to take a rotation, get more of those obliques, transverse abdominals, more of the pec. So you can make it specific, but you let them solve it. At the end, this was Damaris seeing how many squats she could do. And on the Faster Hub there, we have different targets. We've got near targets, far targets. We've got dots, we've got numbers, and we've got triangles. So we can play around and keep that nice and varied. One of my favourites, reaction, because it's so much fun. There, Hina was having to react to the ball, and the harder she hit it, the harder it would come back to her. Again, the one in the middle I love, because you can play around that. You can start and you can go nice and easy, and you can watch how your client's moving on that day, and you're picking up how they're feeling. But then you can give them the control seat, and they get to play and drive you around. So they're distracted, and they know what game success looks like. Balls, things like that. Or it could be whenever you see if ever a bird comes across, don't get many of those in the gym, but if you train in a park, then you have to do a certain movement. And the great thing is you start to be able to build these games and put them together, but every single one should be around your client, what they like, what they enjoy doing. In the middle there, it's more of a ski-based game. And one of the things that my client was struggling with here was extreme pain around her ankles, particularly when she put her ski boots on. So we got her to bring her ski boots, start gently, and then start to build up games where she could wear these boots, change the experience, and think, actually, this is pretty good. This is okay. I've got this. In the last one, simple game. I do love a bit of Connect 4, and it turns out that Hina's very competitive. So when she didn't want to lunge, but if she had to lunge forward and take her turn at Connect 4, she was in. And all of this was put together because I used the faster process, which took me away from thinking that I had to correct clients and I had to make them move in a certain way, in a way that I thought was around fixing. But this simple process starts off with, can we help? And that's when you refer out if you need to. We haven't got time to go into the research today, but if someone would like to know more about the research behind what movements to use and how to put these games together, and around changing experience, whether it's for chronic pain or fibromyalgia, then you can message me. We need to know what our clients are capable of. So the measurement should be relevant to them. So it's not an assessment that just comes out of a book, a one-size cookie cutter fits all. It's a unique assessment that measures what they're confident in doing, what they're capable in doing. And then we can go and have fun and create games that use our skills around biomechanics, help them build skills, and make sure that we put the right feeling to that, the right energy system. But what we need to make sure, and I hope that today we've really gone over, is that movement can't be simplified into just biomechanics. It can't be simplified into just brain neurology. It can't be simplified into those things at all. Everything is about the body, the brain, the environment, and the task. And those four things are behind everything that we experience, including fibromyalgia. So the next time you find yourself saying words that could be conceived or create a feeling where someone might feel they're being corrected, see if you can rephrase it. See if you can choose something that might be more positive. So rather than reinforcing that someone might be fragile, give them the opportunity to move themselves or hold a wall if they need to, sit if they need to. But rather than assuming and fixing, be there to show them and let them explore how good they are. But all of this isn't possible unless you've got great listening skills. And I would say it's one of the things that we all need to work on. And it's not easy. It's one of the things in acting where if someone wasn't listening, they looked awful as an actor on stage, because they shouldn't be listening to the words. They should be listening to everything that's going on around them 360. They should be able to be aware of the body language of everybody on stage and be aware of movements that happen within the audience. And I would say that it's one of the things we can all work on, so that we notice when someone's breath changes and what is that telling us. When someone speeds up, slows down, when someone moves out of the space in the camera. So we've had a lot to get through, but I think what I want to leave it on today is games should be fun. Make them about your client, allowing them to self-organize, figure things out, create movement puzzles that they get to solve. Moving doesn't need to look scary, and it doesn't need to look perfect. So if they have a wiggly wobbly squat, but it feels good to them, it's their best movement, great, fantastic, because we can build on that. but it's not about fixing, it's about exploring. Feeling safe, supported. Support your clients, big them up, and give them the opportunity to explore. And I hope that you've enjoyed today and that there are some key areas that you're going to think, that I'm going to do differently. I've taken that away today, and think about what your next steps are. That might be that you come and see me and see how we can improve listening skills, research, how we can build these games, because I would love to give you the one size fits all, but all your clients have got their unique way of moving, but you can help them reinforce that they've got this. Thank you very much.
Going to leave that up for just a moment. I will put this up again, but thank you, Joanne. That was really interesting, really fascinating. Yeah, I think I have a question, but I'm going to let everyone else go first. If you do have a question, drop it in the questions panel. We'll get to it in just a moment. I'm going to put this information up that Joanne has up now in just a moment, so you'll see that again. I'm going to do a couple of promos here, especially for our next webinar starting us off. Coming up next, we have Kimberly Williams-Evans back with us again. She's going to be doing ab workouts for exercisers over 50, which I thought was a really neat topic when she proposed this one to me, just because you see a lot of stuff on ab training, but you don't see much for people that are over 50, which means there's probably something going on in those spines. So it should be a good session and give you some unique ideas for ab training for those over 50. Be sure to sign up for that one. You can go to our website, medfitclassroom.org. At the top, you'll find a menu that's online education. Slide that down to 2025 webinars, and you can find that one or any other one we have coming up. That's 2 weeks from today on Tuesday, June 10th. And sign up for that one or any others. You can access all of our past webinars by going to medfittv.org. This is available as a separate monthly or annual subscription if you like. It is, however, included as part of the MedFit Network membership. If you are a fitness professional, you'd want to take a look at the MedFit Network. If you're not already a member, I know many people on this probably are. But if you're not, it's a referral network where you can get clients sent to you that have certain medical conditions. And when you have the expertise that matches up with the medical condition that they are seeking assistance with while they still pursue fitness, they'll be sent to you. And also, this does include the MedFit TV subscription. And there's also membership with, not membership, but there's numerous discounts with different product and fitness product and service companies. Some are industry focused, some are more consumer focused, like just shoes and other things. You can get some good discounts on some things as well. And then lastly, here is the information that Joanne had up a little bit ago. I'll leave this up while we take questions so you can review it and just take notes on any part of it that you like. And let's pull up the questions panel. We'll see what awaits us. I have one too. I'm going to throw in quickly before I get into these too much. Oh, actually, there aren't any in there yet, believe it or not. I thought there would be. So that, I'm going to ask.
We didn't get to cover all the different things that potentially could be part of fibromyalgia.
We got about 25 people live with us, so it's who knows. But I'll say this: have you noticed that when you're playing games and when you're interacting with people in a physical way, but there's also an emotional context of play? Would you find that, and this is just subjective, I'm not asking you to quote research, this is just in your experience because it's what I've found to be true, and maybe you've had similar experience, that when you're doing that, the emotional context of play around movement in and of itself makes movement less painful, even if it is normally a movement that is painful. Have you found that to be the case? I'm sure it's not 100% of the time, but it's just in general.
I totally do. And, that is followed with research, putting it into being context, meaningful, task-based. And I think the big thing as well is the control factor, that they're in control of it. It's not being forced upon them. But definitely that, just the whole play, you can see it happening in that moment. You can also see people just go, oh, relax, and just letting things go.
Yeah, it's great to see that too. And I also like in one of the photos where you were demonstrating one of the ways to do an exercise, you showed yourself doing the less challenging modification, the seated one. It might seem like it's not a big deal and even worth mentioning, but I think it's important for us as instructors to be mindful of what we demonstrate ourselves doing. And I just appreciate that you were okay with doing the easier version. You know, a lot of times fitness presenters were always like, I want to show me doing the hardest thing. And I think it's great when we set a good example of really believing and showing and through our actions, showing that all different variations of an exercise have value, because they might be the one that's very challenging for someone on that day, and that's the stepping stone to later. So I just want to give you a little shout out for that as well. I think it's important to, you know, put our superhero like abilities aside and go to a place where we're okay with showing us doing some less intense versions of things.
What I found interesting in even going through this whole process and looking at everything is how I felt like I had a certainty. And I would say there isn't a certainty. And that's a big thing I want everyone to take away. We can't be certain on what somebody's movement should look like. But if it feels good to them, they need to be in control of that. And, you know, where I think I had initially, certainly going back, you know, a few years, that it was all about the central nervous system. Now, although that is a big, massive part of it, you know, with fibromyalgia, there is also a case for being linked to trauma. But in the same light, we can't go down the path of going, it's trauma related, because with that can come stigma. And that too can have its opportunities and its moments of holding people back. And so that's why I think it's so important that we see the person for who they are and work with them building those opportunities. And it wasn't so long ago that we thought it was more about neurological inflammation, but again, the research studies on that are much more correlation, not causation. There are some similarities with depression, and some of that was linked with imbalances of serotonin and dopamine. But again, that's kind of gone away since about 2000. There's much more meta-analysis to say that there's not a strong enough link, and those studies were kind of done on rodents, so not quite as good on there. So that, you know, I think that always put the person first, and that will inform you where to start the games. And obviously with a presentation, you want to have this wow image, but actually I want you to know that sometimes the most important game might be just getting somebody to feel safe with their hands across the wall, and they're literally just able to turn left and right, and they're now playing tennis with their head. And that is a great game to start with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said a lot of really meaningful things in there. And I think the one that stands out to me is that Ed was at the beginning, that certainty, we crave certainty. Certainty is comfortable. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. And I think anytime we're dealing with the human system and somebody says it's all about the blank, whatever's going to go in that blank is probably going to be not the full answer, because it's so complex and it's so multifactorial. And then, but I guess that's the origin of the old saying about how it's, you know, good to be young when you have all the answers to everything and you know everything, and then you get older and then you realize everything's gray area and nuance and you learn what you don't know. I'm going to close this out with a comment from Karen, who has taken your course. She just said, "Thank you, Joe. Love that. And for anyone thinking of joining Joe for her motor skill application specialist course, it's eye-opening and life-changing. Initially, it helped me understand my own pain and fatigue in a way nothing else has. And for the last 8 years, my clients have been benefiting from me doing this course." So thanks for sharing that, Karen. I'm sure anyone curious would be appreciative of hearing that as well. And I think that's there's no other questions in the panel anyway that I can see. Let me double check. Got one just come in. What do you think about the idea that play is a natural human way expressed in children naturally to fall into, flow, and access levels of comfort and safety? Oh, I'm 100% on board for that. You don't even have to answer this one, but go ahead if you want to.
I think the great thing about play is that it takes away rules. And I think that most people in the fitness industry are amazing people. We don't do it for the money. We do it for the love, and we want to help people. But with that, sometimes can come the flip side danger where we want to fix, and that then becomes about this self-righting, and I think we have to let that go, and that's what play is really good about. There isn't somebody controlling or fixing. We've
Yeah.
just got something to explore.
Yes, Sebastian, I read a book years ago. I think it's by Stuart Brown called Play. He's kind of a researcher in the play space, and it's really it's pretty powerful. It just gives you a sense of he gives you some definitions of what play is, but you have a freedom from time, you have a loss of sense of the passage of time, you have this play like it's almost like pretend fighting. If you look at it in the animal kingdom, cats and they're kind of hunting, and that's really what play is for humans too. We don't need as much of it as adults, but we do need some of it because of the lightening of the emotional burden that adulthood brings, that play brings. Because of that burden that comes as a part of adulthood, I think it's exceedingly valuable for people, especially those who perceive exercise as just this drudgery, this task, this thing they have to do to get in shape, and it's this forced, like unpleasant thing. If we make if we make exercise play and we make play exercise, then we've done people a good
I think
it's changing how they think about it and feel about it.
With that, there's so much that we could go into there, because on the faster courses we look into story, and that's something that's a heart of me as well within being an actress. And there are certain journeys that people are taken on through films, through going to see a live band, and we can create. And I touched on that when I talked about selecting the right biomechanics at the right time for the way that it feels in the moment to that person. Yeah. And then also selecting the right energy system, being aware that you're controlling and helping that experience. It's not happening by accident. And it's not happening by accident the way they feel 3 days later.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, thank you for that question, Sebastian. Thank you all for attending and giving us the gift of your time and attention. And thank you to Joanne for sharing her expertise and experiences with us. It was really an interesting session. So be sure to watch the replay. Be sure to check out her course there. And hey, thank you all so much. We'll see you again on another MedFit Education Foundation webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.